Good evening, and welcome to tonight's virtual keynote address, Acknowledging Our Past and Defining Our Future, as sponsored by Texas Christian University's Race and Reconciliation Initiative. But before we go any further, we would like to respectfully acknowledge all Native American peoples who have lived on this land since time immemorial. TCU especially acknowledges and pays respect to the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose historical homelands our university is located. By way of self-introduction, my name is Dr. Frederick Gooding Jr., aka Dr. G. I'm indeed the captain of my ship and the master of my destiny. And if Velda Fernandez is watching, that is indeed a true story. I hail from Philadelphia. Thus, I am somewhat embarrassed to have a picture of New York City in my background, the hometown of my queen, or wife of 24 years, but such are the sacrifices of love. I am also chair of the Race and Reconciliation Initiative at TCU, otherwise known as RRI. The goal of RRI is to fulfill the Chancellor and Board of Trustees' charge of studying racism, slavery, and the Confederacy. While the first year of research thus focuses primarily upon Black Americans, this is merely the first step, as many additional identities and histories of our TCU community must and will be explored in subsequent years. Again, by way of clarification, RRI is an academically based, historically focused initiative designed to investigate and document TCU's history. Thus, while you may feel free to submit questions of our keynote speaker during the presentation, as a courtesy, we will direct questions outside of our scope and charge to the appropriate parties for proper attention. Our action-oriented approach has us researching a survey report for public sharing in April 2021. But in the meantime, we seek to stay in community and stay in conversation through spaces like these, where we can keep the ideas of reconciliation fresh on our hearts and minds. So once again, today's topic is entitled Acknowledging Our Past, Defining Our Future. We are fortunate you can join us and join our discussion today, as we are hopeful we can provide critical perspective, deepened understanding that we hope will ultimately push us forward and toward action and healing, or in other words, reconciliation. At this time, I would like to invite another student athlete, Mr. Gordon Dawson, as he will properly introduce our guest.
Thank you, Dr. G. It is with great Horned Frog pride that I would like to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. As soon as he stepped on TCU's campus, he was already a star. Setting school records, he won the Doak Walker Award in the year 2000 for Nation's Best Running Back, while being a Heisman finalist in the same year. Entering the NFL draft, he was selected with the 5th pick in the 2004 NFL draft by the San Diego Chargers. In his NFL career, he won the 2006 League MVP and was a 5-time Pro Bowler. He was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame in 2017 and the College Football Hall of Fame in 2014. Yet his off-the-field credentials are just as impressive. Mr. Tomlinson created the Tomlinson's Touching Lives Foundation. This foundation enhances the lives of deserving families through education, social and cultural awareness, and positive self-esteem. He also was the Walter Payton Man of the Year in 2006. Without further ado, let's welcome a true TCU football legend and someone we all look up to. Our keynote speaker tonight, LaDainian Tomlinson.
If this was my last day on earth and this my final speech, this is the message I'll leave with you. The story of a man I never met. My great-great-great-grandfather, George. 170 years ago, George was brought here in chains on a slave ship from West Africa. His last name, Tomlinson, was given to him by the man who owned him. Tomlinson was the slave owner's last name. What extraordinary courage it must have taken for him to rebuild his life after the life he was born to was stolen. How did he reclaim his identity, his dignity, when he had no freedom to choose for himself? I grew up on the land of a former slave plantation, and although I didn't know this as a child, it is where my great-great-great-grandfather tilled the soil. A few years ago, I visited that same plantation in Central Texas with my family and stood in the slave quarters where he lived. It's now named Tomlinson Hill.
Thank you, Dawson. First, thank you to Chancellor Victor Boschini for asking us to establish this commission. Thank you as well to the inaugural team, our ex officio members, and our graduate research assistant. Of course, thank you to Frederick Gooding Jr., PhD, for choosing to spearhead this initiative, and Karen Steele, PhD, in the office of provost. Time does not permit me to thank the score of undergraduate and graduate students for contributing untold hours and truly valuable insights. But I must at least acknowledge Leslie Ekpe, who is a PhD student, and Tosin Alau, who have been formally appointed as core members of the Race and Reconciliation Initiative Task Force. Third, Marcellus Perkins, a graduate assistant who had contributed substantially behind the scenes. I am so honored to be here. I'm honored for so many reasons. First and foremost, I love this university. I am a proud graduate of Texas Christian University. This university helped mold me into the man I became and the man I continue to strive to be. When I was a young student, it was initially learning to navigate the university system. Academic life was rigorous and grueling, and there were challenges as I learned to balance academics, athletics, and my personal life. There wasn't one individual, one member of the university faculty or administration who was not there to support me, not simply because I was LT, the running back for our team, but because each and every one of you cared about me, LaDainian Tomlinson, the man. Your values, respect, dignity, belief in God, were a continuation of the values I was raised with at home and were also taught by my pastor, Echo. Another reason I am honored to be standing before you today is that it is yet another opportunity to use my voice as an advocate for change. I was deeply moved when the National Football League reached out to me this past season and told me they wanted to use a portion of my Hall of Fame speech to launch the NFL's 2020-21 season. Later, they also let me know that they wanted to present it again during Super Bowl halftime a few weeks ago. It's humbling to acknowledge that tens of millions of people have heard my voice and my message advocate for social justice. Now, I look forward to adding my voice to our collective voice, amplifying the values and the lessons learned from this initiative. During my 4 years at TCU, I felt a definite sense of fellowship. And when I look back at the 11 years I was privileged to play in the National Football League, I also found fellowship there. As I said in my Hall of Fame speech, August 2017, football is a microcosm of America. All races, religions, and creeds living, playing, competing side by side. When you're a part of a team, you understand your teammates, their strengths and weaknesses, and work toward the same goal, to win a championship. Paraphrasing that same paragraph, TCU is a microcosm of America. All races, religions, and creeds living, playing, learning side by side. When you're a part of Team TCU, you understand your classmates, their values, their strengths and weaknesses. And through the university's vision and values, work toward the same goal, to become the finest person and valued member of society possible. We are here to make a difference that only each of us can make. And this prestigious university is committed to helping every one of its students fulfill our promise. Continuing what I went on to say in Cannes that extraordinary August night. In this context, I advocate we become Team America. So, in my talk today, acknowledging our past, defining our future, I advocate that we become Team TCU. All of us who have had the opportunity to be associated with this great university understand our responsibilities extend beyond these house halls. Our mission to educate individuals to think and act as ethical leaders and responsible citizens in the global community isn't just an aspirational dream. It is a clear, actionable statement. We aspire to be a world-class, value-centered university. And through this, we represent not only what TCU stands for, but we create the opportunity to put into practice not merely the university's values, Christian values, but human values. Dr. King said, quote, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence of character, that is the goal of true education," close quote. Another relevant observation from Dr. King applicable to this moment states, quote, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in a moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy," close quote. I so appreciate this particular quotation because it reflects the importance of our individual character and our university's integral character, which must withstand all challenge and controversy. Once completed, it is imperative that our initiative reflect the character of all of us. That is what TCU stands for. It is not simply an eloquent document, but rather guiding principles which become the perfect map for our journey as we strive to ennoble ourselves and others. Now, I will segue to discuss last summer's announcement by our Board of Trustees and the Chancellor's Office, the decision to painstakingly and thoroughly examine our history, to include our university's historical connections to racism, slavery, and our founding brothers, Addison and Randolph Clark, who fought for the Confederacy. For me, not merely as a graduate of TCU, but as a graduate whose extended family is mixed race. And when I read what Mark Johnson, chairman of TCU's Board of Trustees, and the Chancellor Boschini said in their joint letter to our community, quote, "We firmly believe that comprehensively examining and addressing our history, we will come to what makes us a more inclusive TCU, providing an even stronger foundation upon which to build our future." Continuing, they said, "We must and will do more. In so doing, we will adhere more profoundly to TCU's mission statement and core values, which repudiate all forms of racism," close quote. Another reason I chose to deliver this address today is because of whom you chose to serve as the chair of our initiative, Professor Frederick Gooden Jr. Dr. Gooden is a trained historian, an associated professor of African American Studies, and highly respected in this field. With Dr. Gooden at the helm, I am assured that, as he says, quote, "The whole story, the full story," close quote, will be told, and TCU will be seen as having paved the way for other academic institutions to do the same. We have all borne witness this past year to cataclysmic racial, social turmoil, and upheaval in our nation. We experienced this in 2020, not 1863 during the height of the Civil War. This bears repeating. In the 21st century, we are still confronting the same prejudice that we confronted as a nation 160 years ago. Perhaps we are not fighting the same Civil War, but we are still fighting the same prejudice. In December 1955, when Rosa Parks climbed on that Alabama bus and sat down in the front of the bus, and in 1957, when President Eisenhower signed the Civil Rights Act, to Dr. King's August 1963 March on Washington, which led to President Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This was one continuous drive for inclusion and equity. Now, whether it be the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis or documented reports of Black members of our community being confronted by white supremacists, or having the N-word used against students on our campus. The struggle continues. We can become the university we deserve to be when we confront the ignominy of our past and our present, to better assure a more equitable, inclusive future for all at Texas Christian University. I know on my committee, one of the subjects I will examine is the role that systemic racism plays in our society. A few months ago, I was heading out on a hunting trip with 3 close friends, another Black man and 2 white friends. We headed off from the gas station we met at, I in my black Lincoln SUV, and they in their car. A few moments later, just like clockwork, the light goes on, the siren goes on, and I get pulled over. I get pulled over, they don't get pulled over. Then the conversation ensued. You have heard about that conversation. Well, I had it, me, LT, at the age of 41. It takes all of us to create the change I speak of. It takes great courage, bravery from all of us. I was taught in my family, I was taught in my church to treat everyone with dignity, with respect for each individual, regardless of the color of their skin or their social status, as we are all created in the image of God. I believe this to be the perfect moment to share a personal story that I've never publicly shared, as it speaks to what we all must grapple with if we are truly to achieve what we aspire to achieve through this commission. We must look into our very soul, identify the hiding places within each of us where our true character, our true essence may have been hidden from us, to discover who we are capable of being and what we stand for. 20th century author Henry Miller said, quote, "The man whom God loves is the onion with a million skins. To shed the first layer is painful beyond words. The next layer is less painful. The next is still less. And finally, the identity which was lost is recovered." Close quote. This quotation reveals the dedicated efforts, the ceaseless commitment required to pursue what one of my mentors teaches is the discovery of our deeper self. As some of you may know, in 2017, my Hall of Fame speech went viral. I believe it went viral primarily because of what I would next share with you when I said my great-great-great-grandfather, George, 173 years ago, was brought here in chains on a slave ship from West Africa. His last name, Tomlinson, was given to him by the man who owned him. Tomlinson was a slave owner's last name. I grew up on the land of a former slave plantation, the exact plantation where my grandfather tilled the soil. The slave quarters where he lived are now named Tomlinson Hill. Continuing, I said, I firmly believe that God chose me to bring 2 races together under one name, Tomlinson. My story is TCU's story. Next, before sharing how I came to learn this, there is a moment backstory leading up to it. I was 22 years old and had just joined the San Diego Chargers. When my mother first came to me and said, "LaDainian, I think you should talk to Chris Tomlinson." Chris Tomlinson is the great-great-grandson of our ancestors' slave owners. I said, "What? No, Mom, I'm not ready for that." My first emotions were to run from this truth because I knew it would be ugly, nasty, and very hurtful. It took me 5 years of running from that conversation while my mother persisted, and I kept repeating, I'm not ready. Deep down, I didn't want to hear that I came from slaves, even though I knew it. I didn't want to know the truth. I didn't want to know the stories about it. I thought, if I don't have to hear about this, if I can forget about it, it never happened. It was just too painful. Finally, 5 years later, I called Chris up and said, Chris, this is LaDainian. I know that you have been trying to reach me through my mother, and she told me that we needed to talk. He said, yes, I followed your career. I'm a reporter with the Associated Press. So we met at a Starbucks near my home. He had brought with him a suitcase full of artifacts that showed the slave ship my great-great-great-grandfather came on, the roster of slaves that the Tomlinson family owned. He told me the story. After spending 3 hours with him, I still felt incomplete and a little empty. I had so many emotions, so much confusion I had to work through. My rage and sadness regarding what my ancestors had to endure. But little by little, as I came to understand the truth of my history, I began to rebirth myself. When I felt that I was ready to reach out to Chris again, he drove me to the slave plantation where it all began. He took me to a house that was completely broken down and told me that it was the slave quarters where my great-great-great-grandfather lived and my grandmother grew up. My being asked to speak here today reflects the integrity of our mission. When I shared with the friend that I've been asked to deliver this message today, he said, how ironic, LaDainian, that God used a descendant of slaves to deliver this speech. God chose me, he said, because I have been taught the power of forgiveness. However, forgiveness does not mean that I have forgotten. Rather, through my forgiveness, I am now better able to rise above the partisan discussion and the obvious racial divide that continues in our community and in our nation. So now, out of the horrific life my ancestors had to exist in, I stand before you today, committed to pay it forward. You chose to form this commission because of your love for this university. In this moment, I'm alerting you to the pain, the sadness that we will all have to grapple with as we emerge to become a more enlightened university. When Chris told me the truth, it was ultimately the healing I needed. When we here today learn the truth that will be revealed through this commission, not only will the character of the university be enhanced, but equally, if not more importantly, ours will as well. In closing, I will share one final thought from what I said on that momentous day, paraphrasing and humbly building upon what President Obama said. Quote, we all have to try harder, show up, dive in, and stay at it. I am asking you to believe in your ability to bring about change, to hold fast to faith in the idea whispered by slaves. Yes, we can. Close quote. Today, we add to that, without whispering, but shouting, to support the extraordinary initiative that you have placed before us. Not only to shout, yes, we can, but yes, we will. Lead on, TCU. Thank you very much. May God bless you. May God bless this university.
On America's team, let's not choose to be against one another. Let's choose to be for one another. My great-great-great-grandfather had no choice. We have one. I pray we dedicate ourselves to be the best team we can be working and living together, representing the highest ideals of mankind, leading the way for all nations to follow. One of the most eloquent orators of our time said it best in his farewell address. Paraphrasing and humbly building upon what President Obama said, we all have to try harder, show up, dive in, and stay at it. I am asking you to believe in your ability to bring about change, to hold fast to the faith and the idea whispered by slaves. Yes, we can. Thank you very much. Thank you for this honor.
Thank you for that, LT. Why don't we just go ahead and just get into it, because I think the people would love to hear from you, right? Why don't we just pick up from where we just left off in terms of that Super Bowl speech? I think one of the key questions around that is, that was delivered years ago, right? You retired in 2011, you were inducted in the class of 2017, but what was on your mind? What motivated you to put yourself out there with the speech like that? I mean, I could see how if it was August 2020, right? In the aftermath, you had mentioned it earlier, the brutal murder, I don't know how else to describe it, murder of George Floyd, obviously Breonna Taylor, Atiana Jefferson, all these names that like just led into us the summer of social justice. I could see where if you did a speech like that in August 2020, okay. But you did it in 2017. So what was on your mind, to push you to push this message out there at a place where you could really just talk about how you're thankful for your coach and your moms and, and things of that nature? What made you talk about this topic?
Yeah, well, first, I wanted to be a difference maker. I wanted to do something that would leave a lasting impact on our nation. And I felt like, obviously, that was the biggest stage that I will ever have in my life. I mean, I'm going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Everyone knows it. And it's not really about me at that time. It was about, how can I use this platform? How can I use this opportunity that I have to say what's on my mind? And if you remember, Dr. G, as you mentioned, I retired in 2011. Well, from 2012 to 2017, we really saw a lot of social justice things happening. Police brutality. Some of our younger Black kids being killed by police, Michael Brown and Tamir Rice, and so many different things that were happening. Black Lives Matter. And there was so much upheaval in our nation. There was so many things, so many conversations that was being had. And in my mind, I was thinking, I want to say something to this country. I want to speak from a place that had to go through this, had to learn my history of slavery. And it wasn't easy for both sides. I know people, hopefully they don't think it was easy for Chris Tomlinson to come talk to me about what his family did to my family. That wasn't easy. And so after going through all this, that's why I decided to come up with what I came up with on that speech on that August 2017 night. And that was the product of 5 years of the turmoil that was going on in our nation.
Okay. And so let me ask you this. When you talk about it being difficult, I mean, what are your thoughts on why it is? Because you mentioned it's difficult on both sides. So this is, I think, primarily geared towards, say, the white brothers and sisters that you work with, right? Being a celebrity. Why do you think it's difficult for people, or awkward for people to engage this idea of social justice? I mean, so many people run away from it, right? But you're not running away from it, you're engaging it, right? So what's your take on why it is awkward, and what's been your experience in terms of being able to navigate that?
Yeah, I think the awkwardness comes from a place of, embarrassment, to be quite honest. That's the way, because most people think of slavery or racism as something that happened a long time ago, and they don't see it they don't see it in their everyday life. So why address it? And, I think when it does happen, when we do see certain things, like police brutality, just for an example, it's one of those things that people want to kind of push to the side and say, that's a one-off. That's not really, reflective of the entire country. But at the same time, I think what our professional athletes first have started to do is they have started to raise more awareness of what's going on in their own communities. That's why we're starting to see more things happening through social media, through these young men and women using their platform to talk about their own community. Because bottom line is, when you make it out of your own community, you become the biggest advocate for your own community. Why? Because your voice has been amplified. You have the biggest microphone to speak for your community. And so as we get further removed from our community, but we have people still in our community, cousins, aunts and uncles that are telling us, man, this happened in our community. This, I got pulled over for no reason. I wasn't doing anything. You keep hearing these things and you feel like you need to do something. But unfortunately, everybody doesn't feel like that, Dr. G. Some people want to stay, inside their own homes, stay to themselves and live their life, raise their kids, and think it's going to be okay. It will be okay for a little while, but your kids will have to deal with this one day. So why not you deal with it before your kids have to deal with it?
I see what you're saying. So you're saying, why not make that investment now? Because these issues really haven't gone away. I mean, I remember what you were saying about how the struggle continues. You mentioned the personal scenario where you were actually pulled over. I mean, you weren't LT, you were a black man in a black car, an expensive black car, right? That was the scenario. So based upon your relationship with the university since you left, how do you think TCU culture has changed? Because I noticed you started off and you were very emphatic. You said, I love TCU. And I know there's a lot of students right now who are feeling maybe something different because they're in a place of pain, right? TCU maybe has not fulfilled what TCU promised, many of these students. And so, I'm wondering like how you get to the point where you can say, I love TCU, and based upon what you've seen, change, because last thing I'll say before you roll is, just a couple days ago, we had a student panel, and it was an actual student athlete, football player, who mentioned that told an anecdote where people have actually come up to him and approached him with the line, "What's your number?" Right? Not "Good afternoon, comma, it's sunny outside, comma, excuse me, comma, what's your number?" which is still inflammatory. Not "Hello, what's your name, comma, what's your number?" but just "What's your number?" And so if that's what's happening today, I'm just curious what you've seen change with the culture to the point to where you're still able to say you still love TCU.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the first thing is we obviously still have a long way to go. There's no question about that. Some of the same things are happening today happened when I was on campus as well. But the way I dealt with it, I removed myself.
Wait, people ask you, what's your number? People ask you that?
Well, they knew my number, obviously, but I'm saying some of the same things that these young athletes, student athletes are dealing with in terms of some of the things that are said that you hear around campus that are racially charged, some of the names that are being called, those types of things. It was there when I was at the university. There was no question about that. And so we still have a long way to go, but I think where it's different now is there's more programs, there's more people that you can reach out to learn more about diversity and equity and inclusion and try to be a part of the solution. I honestly felt like when I was at the university, I was somewhat secluded. I was somewhat, for us, it was all about football. And so we didn't get a chance to interact a lot with regular students. And that's how it was different. I lived off campus. I didn't spend a lot of time on campus. So for me, it was about football and my education. That was it. I didn't really worry about what else was going on, even though I knew some of the things that my friends had been through. Now, when you talk about today, how do I say I love this university? Well, because now I'm in a place that I'm here to serve the university. I want to create change. And the more stories I hear like this from our current students and student athletes, the more I can do, the more I can have an impact with as I chair my subcommittee on the study and advisement of social issues. That's why I say I love this university, because of the position that I've been put in to help this university grow.
And by the way, thank you for correcting me about. I'm sure people knew your numbers, so yeah, that's on me. I'm sure you're right about that. So speaking of this idea of growth and change, right? Obviously, the reason why we're here is because of this Race and Reconciliation Initiative. So would you mind sharing, like, what were your thoughts when you heard about that? Having been a student, you graduated from TCU, and just just hearing all the changes that have been taking place over time. What were your thoughts about the initiative, and what are your hopes for it?
Well, my first thoughts were, man, this is really awesome, but it's gonna be hurtful. It's gonna be painful for a lot of people, because when you have to relive kind of the past, it brings up a lot of memories and emotions, even if you didn't particularly go through it. You have a connection with people in our past. As African American people, I obviously have a connection with those folks. And when you hear about some of the things that we had to endure, it makes you wonder. I know personally, I wondered for a long time, Dr. G, why am I the person in my family to make it to where I made it to? Why was I the one to take my last name on both sides, the white side in the family and the black side, to a higher level, to a level that's never been had before? Why me? Why did my ancestors have to endure what they endured, in slave quarters, when I'm a millionaire and I have a big house and I'm living, like I'm living? Like, I had to struggle with that for a long time because I couldn't understand why. And it's something that we all must grapple with as we start to learn the truth about this. So I was happy about it initially, because I think it is the right thing to do. And I'm proud of Chancellor Victor Boschini for saying we have to do this. This is how we move forward. This is how we become a more inclusive university and show all people that we're trying and we care for every student that's at the university.
Okay, and so essentially what you're telling me is you've been blessed, but as a result of all these blessings, there comes this responsibility. And so therefore, rather than just squirrel away and just sit up in your crib, the idea is that no, you still feel this urge to use it and leverage this platform to shed light and drop gems on people.
Well, I've always believed that my legacy will not involve football. It will be part of my legacy. Football will be part of my legacy. Mm-hmm. But I've always believed I'm going to live longer, hopefully, than the years I playing football. So why can't I create a different legacy beyond the football field? And I feel like I've been put in position to do just that, to make a change. First off, I feel like I'm a humanitarian. Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind, is I'm here to give back as much as I can, to help my fellow man as much as I can. And the more I learn, the more, I kind of understand my own self and my personal journey, especially with this topic. Mm-hmm. The more I can help others. I have plenty of friends. I mean, we talk about, as I'm sure you do, we talk about these topics. And it's not just Black friends, it's white friends. And Dr. G, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take more honest conversations with each other. And I'll tell this to people. Shame on you if you don't have a friend that don't look like you. Like
Oh,
in today's age, if you don't have a friend that doesn't look like you, then shame on you, because how are you gonna get to know someone that doesn't look like you? How are you gonna have empathy on someone that doesn't look like you? How are you gonna realize the struggle that someone else might be going through if you don't get to know these people? So I've always believed that the only way we can come together is have that team mindset. That's why I talked about Team TCU. When you're a part of a team, you have to get to know every person on your football team in order to become just like this.
wow. Okay. I mean, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, because I think when I think about a university, it's uniquely positioned whereby young adults are able to have a variety of different experiences, right? And I think you're right that it's a matter of taking more advantage of this opportunity where people can learn different perspectives as they move forward and hopefully lead on, right? As our mantra goes. But speaking of humanitarian, you had mentioned something that, I just wanted to kind of pivot back to that. Word on the street is that your mother has been working to bring back the town of Marlin or something of that nature. I think we would like to know, how has that effort gone? And because I know there's been a lot of economic divide in that town, and so would you be able to share a little bit more about that effort?
Yeah, well, my mom, as most people know, she's a terrific lady. She really has a great heart, and she cares about where she's from, obviously. And Marlin is dear to her, and obviously for significant in ways that this is where our family truly comes from. Like from slave days, my family was in Marlin, and so to see it kind of get to a place when I was growing up where it was thriving and there were jobs and the high school there was prominent to where it is now, it's hard to see. And she's down there trying to, do anything she can to make sure that people have jobs and there are, economic growth. So she's talking to city council members, the mayor of the town, and police chiefs and all kind of people, anybody that will listen to try to change what's going on in that town right now.
Wow, God bless her. So she's still hustling hard, huh?
She is, man. I'm trying to tell her, just sit down somewhere, Mom. You don't have to work so hard. But of course, our mom, like all of us, most of us, our mom doesn't listen to. They don't listen to us.
Well, we see the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in terms of your continued work ethic and commitment and dedication, right? And so I think,
Yeah.
That is still a model for us to follow. This idea that the struggle doesn't stop, and so the fight must continue. And so speaking of continue, I mean, do you have any thoughts on how a powerhouse like TCU Athletics, part of the Big Five, power conference, how they might be able to leverage the influence and prestige to create genuine and positive change for disenfranchised members of the community? Or do they even have that responsibility?
No, I think they do. I think the responsibility that the university has is one that, should be represented by the town of Fort Worth. I mean, when you think about the town of Fort Worth, the first thing you think about is TCU. So if someone says, "Oh, I'm going to Fort Worth," I want them to think about Texas Christian University and what that university stands for. And the first thing you want it to stand for is fairness. And like we talk about, leading on. That's our motto, right? To lead on, to be innovative, And so I think the university definitely has a responsibility. And we know this, that athletics serves as, I would say, the upfront. As someone told me before, athletics is the front door into the home, right? So athletics get people watching, it get eyes on the university. And then it is up to university to execute all the things that we talk about. We talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, so that when people come see the university or visit the university or just research the university, they will know that this is a diverse place, that this is a place of inclusion, and this university is doing what they say they will do.
So to go there, if we're talking about executing a plan, how will you be interacting with other members of the Board of Trustees to get their full-fledged support for RRI?
Well, I think, for one, we have great members on the board. There's no question about that. Everyone on that board cares about the university, and we all have our particular, obviously, committees that we sit on, but at the same time, we understand our responsibility to this university, because the way, to a person, the way we all feel is one day it's not going to be about us no more at that university. Like, we're not going to be on the board. It's going to be a whole new generation. What kind of university do we want to leave for our younger generation? What kind of changes can we say we allowed to happen or we made happen for this younger generation? And I guarantee you, every one of our members, our board members, are committed to the change. That's why we have created such committees like the one I talked about, the study and advisement on social issues. That's why we created that. And you know what? I hear from a lot of our members that want to be a part of the committee. So that lets me know that this is important to them.
Okay. So we only have time for a couple more questions. So I just want to pivot a little bit to you in terms of the respect that you have on and off the field. But I wanted to ask you in particular, how does it feel to be referenced in song? Because I was just, I'm a hip hop fan, and I know a lot of our Cali fans listening out there, because we have people from GMB to people in Argentina listening. And the idea is that, there's a LA River Drive song by Dilated Peoples. I don't know if you heard of this underground hip hop group. And in 2014, he came out with this track called LA River Drive. And they said, remember, this is after you retire. This is after you retire. So they said, hold your pass at will call, biggest giants will fall, lightning bolt your ear like LT, but this ain't football. So what does that mean to you when you have cats bringing your name up in song after you stop even, after you literally hung up the cleats?
Man, that's special, and just being totally transparent. As athletes, we look for that, right? We want that connection with the hip hop community or pop culture, right? So that lets us know that, hey, we're doing something right. If pop culture is referencing, my name, or I hear my name in the rap, it's like, man, I've made it. I've really made it. I remember a long time ago when I first heard my name in a rap. It came from a Houston rapper named Lil Keke, and he was rapping, and he said 21 on the charger. I call it LaDainian, and that was the hardest line, because at that time, Dodge Chargers were huge.
You might have to explain that, for some of our audience members. When you say 20, it's a play on words. 21 on the charger. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the car was a Charger, a Dodge car. It's a Charger.
Right.
21 rims, like 21-inch rims. 21, Charger, 21 on Charger. I call it LaDainian. Like, that was just like perfect wordplay. So.
No, I appreciate you breaking that down for members of our audience. And so, speaking of this idea of hip hop and voice, what would you tell a student who wants to use their voice for change, and most especially a student athlete, right? Because you had mentioned just for yourself, the way your life was structured, football was almost like a full-time job, right? In addition to athletics, right? And so what would you recommend? What would be some advice as far as those who are looking to amplify their voice for change?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's different today that was obviously it wasn't around back when I was playing is social media and the platform that these student athletes have now. It is huge. Like, they can speak to tens of thousands of people, if not millions of people that will listen to them. So that's the first thing I would say. But when you do that, understand that this will be a lifelong struggle. This will be something you can't just pick up for a couple of months or a year and then put down. You have to be committed to it. And that means getting out in your own community, understanding what needs to happen in your own community. What areas can you serve your community to raise awareness, as we always talk about? I would say for the student athletes today, that's what they should do. Get out in their community, find the organization that they want to tie themselves to. And once they do that, then they can speak about their organization on their social platforms, because now they have an understanding of the organization, the nuances, if you will, of what's going on in that particular organization, so you can raise awareness to it.
Thank you, my brother. So I got one final question before we land the plane here, and that is, what do you want people to remember about you?
I would say, I mentioned this, just being a humanitarian. I want people to say that when I came across LT, or when I met LT, it changed my life. He was the real deal. He was who he said he was. He was authentic. He was humble. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned, I want people to remember me for impacting their lives more than me running a touchdown, me carrying football and running for yards. Because one day, everyone will forget about the yards and the touchdowns and all that kind of stuff, but they will never forget the impact that I've had on them.
Thank you. And not only will they not forget the running yards, but also the 7 touchdown passes as well.
I appreciate that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for LT. At this moment in time, what I like to do is bring to the stage the mellifluous and the marvelous, the graduate student research assistant wonderkind that LT had referenced. And that would be none other than Mr. Marcellus Perkins.
Thank you, Dr. G, for that wonderful introduction. Can we please give a virtual round of applause for LT, our wonderful host, and all of our team members here today, and to the audience as well. You could have been anywhere in the world doing absolutely anything that you wanted, but instead you took some time to be here with us to hear important messages. For that, thank you. I'm here today just to kind of briefly talk about our podcast that Dr. G and I are co-host on, Reconcile This. Reconcile This is a podcast in which we are talking to the members of our TCU community who are doing the work. These people are champions on our campus day in and day out. They are doing the work of healing and reconciliation. So we ask that you subscribe, listen, comment, let us know your thoughts. Attached here is our website link for our podcast. We are part of all streaming services, Google, Spotify, and Apple. We appreciate your time and your ear. And with that being said, I would like to toss it back to the wonderful Dr. G to close us out. Dr. G.
I appreciate that, Mr. Perkins. And so I would just like to give a shout out to all those in attendance. Again, we had people as far away as Argentina, Illinois, obviously California, even those in G&B land, South Bronx. I mean, it's just a wonderful piece. And I think LT had mentioned that, this idea, the way that technology can connect us. And so we are very appreciative of all of you spending this time with us. We also like to give a shout out to all those in the TCU family who hustled hard to make this successful event happen. Absolutely. I mean, there's so many names to mention, but it was truly a team effort to pull this together and to produce this high quality production. And again, and I'm very appreciative of, if we could bring on the screen our keynote speaker. We're appreciative of your humility. I mean, again, you weren't distracted when the paparazzi were taking photos during the broadcast, right? You kept your cool, you delivered your message. But in all seriousness, I believe that you continue to demonstrate and illustrate a living example for those in our community, especially many of our young kids, our young adults, right? This idea of it's a pivotal stage in life, how do I put this together? Who am I? And how do I go about speaking truth to power, right? Many are concerned about consequences, but I think you are a living example of what it means to speak truth to power. Here you took arguably like a sacred moment, right? Where many people are thinking about, their inside circle, and you flipped it and projected it outward. And as a result, 3 years later, your words are still being repurposed in Super Bowl ads, which, as you know, are international in their scope. And so I think that's a lesson for us in terms of, by taking that risk, by making oneself vulnerable and putting your truth out there, the truth will always stand, right? The truth stands the test of time. And so we appreciate you sharing your truth, right? And I'm very appreciative of you acknowledging that this is not a light switch where, we form a committee and, we're done. No, I mean, you acknowledge that there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some sadness. There's some dark, embarrassing chapters that we have to confront and reconcile with. But this idea that we're not going to be afraid, we're going to embrace it and not erase our history, right? We're going to embrace it, not erase it. I think that's much of the encouraging message I'm receiving from you. And so we appreciate you modeling what it means to seek reconciliation with one's past. And so I would just like to say, my brother, on behalf of everyone in TCU family, thank you.
Go Frogs.
And so in closing, party people, my final word in the matter is this. While I cannot promise what will happen as a result of TCU's Race and Reconciliation Initiative, I can pledge to you that we are doing the best we can with what we have.
With the fifth pick in the first round of the 2001 draft.
He is an NFL MVP, a rushing champion.
Ron Dane, Archie Griffin, Eric Dickerson. Not one of those running backs ever had more yards rushing in a single season than LaDainian Tomlinson.
LaDainian Tomlinson.
LaDainian Tomlinson from Texas Christian University.
LaDainian Tomlinson, one step closer to football immortality.
Football is a microcosm of America. Let's not slam the door on those who may look or sound different from us. Let's open it wide for those who believe in themselves, that anything is possible.